losing the material stuff? Yeah. Once you make $1 million, it's like riding a bike. Do it all over again. What would I do if I lost everything tomorrow? What would you do if you lost everything tomorrow? Take 0. All right, so I got a comment on the 3 keys for a meaningful life video, and this guy Jacob Loeffler sent me a question that got me thinking. Well, it's a common question, right? And I've actually been asked it several times, but I wanted to pose the question to you, right? So I'm going to go ahead and answer it, and then the call to action will be that for you to answer this question, for you to ask this question of yourself, and then to answer it in the comments below. To keep Zach from getting mad at me, please make sure you hit like, subscribe, share this video with somebody who could find it useful, please, and answer this question yourself in the comments below, but start by asking yourself. All right, so here's the question. The question is, if you lost everything this year, how would you deal with it, and how would you build back? And I actually replied to Jacob's comment. It's a great question. And I answered it in 2 ways, right? And you should probably answer it in 2 ways too. So you have all of your material things, all the stuff that you've acquired over your life, right? You have your career, you have your car, your house, your recreational vehicle, you have your paintings and your jewelry, and you have all the things that you've acquired, right? I own many companies, and I've been a successful entrepreneur now for the last decade of my career. I'm a poor kid who made good, right? If I lost all of my material stuff tomorrow, so I woke up tomorrow morning, or by the end of the year, I was totally broke, had everything taken from me. I had every company, every, my cars, my boat, my RV, my homes. I wouldn't sweat it at all. Not even a little. Any entrepreneur, any successful entrepreneur, it is, that doesn't mean that, by the way, they're not going to answer this question the same way. I'm going to answer this question the same way, and here's why. Because remember I talk about how adversity's on a scale, and it's not absolute. The worst thing I've ever gone through is I found my mom dead with 2 bullet holes in her head, right? That's the worst thing I've ever gone through in my life. That's numero uno on my adversity list. It's at the very, very top. And so nothing I experience in life is ever gonna meet that, unless I probably lost a child, right? Which, knock on wood, has never happened, and hopefully I'm long gone when my kids pass away. Divorce, breakups, none of those things are ever gonna, if I ever go through a divorce, it's gonna pale in comparison to the worst thing I've ever been through, right? So obviously, if I lose all my money and I lost all my businesses, lost all my material possessions, I just start rebuilding the next day. I learned, and obviously not every entrepreneur is going to say that, right? Because their adversity scale, right? People who have not faced horrible adversity in their life, having all your material possessions taken from you is probably the worst thing you've ever been through, right? Your career, your businesses, all that stuff, your cars, you have nothing. The first thing I'd do is I'd lean on my network. Day one, I'd literally turn into my network, and I'd think all the people who owe me a favor, all the people I've helped in my, over the course of my life. And, I'd formulate a 90-day plan. And that 90-day plan would be to, find persons or a person or persons in my network who, owe me a favor, who I've done right by. Which is important this is why it's important to do right by people. But I'd lean into my network. Okay. That's the first thing I'd do. And, obviously they would know my value in the market. They would know my personal brand. They'd know, the thing, my ability to build something out of nothing. And it would be pretty easy to get influx of cash right away to make that happen. Okay. Let's say I was still a working class guy and I'm working, I worked at a manufacturer and I lost my job. Right. And my wife left me and, made a false claim against me, and I got no place to stay and all my stuff was taken from me. First thing I do the next day is lean into my network. I wouldn't be thinking about, who cares about me, that kind of thing. I'd be thinking about who are the people I've done right by? Who are the people who owe me favors? And I'd lean into that network. Okay. And I'd find myself some breathing room over 60 to 90 days. Okay. And over that 60 to 90 days, I'd lean into my network even further. I'd throw myself into my work and I would turn nothing into something very quickly. And then I'd scale. Right. That's what I would do. Right. But I'd throw myself into my work. Making your first $1 million is hard. It's hard as fuck. Until you learn how to make $1 million, you're most of what you're doing while you're making that first $1 million is trial and error. You're seeing you're testing what's works, you're testing what's not works. You're learning all the hurdles. Hey, you're thinking about you're learning all the adversity that pops up. You know what I mean? Vendors won't. You can't sign agreements with vendors because the business doesn't have the D&B number's not high enough. Personal credit score is not high enough. You don't have enough capital to support a bond, that kind of thing. You learn all these hurdles, right, in that first $1 million. Once you start hiring people, you learn all the HR bullshit, and you run into some tax issue because you didn't hire the right accountant. That first $1 million. It's really, really tough figuring out how to do that. But after you make your first $1 million, it's like riding a bike. Honestly, it really is. Once you know how to turn nothing into something and scale, you can do that over and over and over again. That's why there are so many serial entrepreneurs out there. So if I lost all my material things, I'd be back on my feet in 90 days. I'd have a plan in 48 hours by leaning into my network. Okay. And I'd be back on my feet in 90 days and I'd be scaling within 12 months. Okay. And, if you look at people say, Donald Trump's filed for bankruptcy, whatever, 3 times, 4 times. Well, yeah, his dad gave him his first $10 million, but he turned that $10 million into hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. And that's the same thing as turning 0 into $1 million. Right. So, he's been able to build his brand into $1 billion brand through failure, through series of failures, right? So losing your material wealth is not a big deal in any way, shape, or form. Although everyone thinks it's the end of the earth, end of the world, right? Most people think it's the end of the world. That's not what I think. I mean, in my head, I'd be able to build back. So yeah, my first day one, I'm leaning into my network. Who owes me favors? I'm leaning into the people that I've done right by. The people who I know in my network they know what my value is in the market, what I can do, how other people can benefit from what I can achieve, right? And within 90 days, I'd have capital built up through, investment loans from my network, right? Whether that's direct dollars or whether indirect dollars, okay? But what if I lost everything personally tomorrow? I lost a child, lost my whole family. A catastrophic personal loss. That's a different story. Okay? That starts with survival. So, day one, you're just surviving. You're putting one foot in front of the other. When my mom died, I found my mom at 7:00 in the morning, and the day my brother and I were together, and my day ended at 9:00 at night when his father picked us up at the police station. So for like a 14-hour window, it's all a blur. But in the morning, I left the babysitter, found my mom dead, spent 14 hours being carted around to various apartments before the police took our statement. And then his dad picked us up at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And 30 minutes later, I'm moving into a 2-bedroom trailer, 15 miles from where my mom died. And I'm sleeping in a completely different bed. Right? When I woke up the next morning, okay, mom's dead. I know she's dead. I remember she's dead. My life is on its ear. And me getting through that day was all about me just one foot in front of the other. So it was my brother, Jerry, was with me. And it was us talking. Not talking deeply, but talking. We both knew what we were doing. We were just doing it in the way that, young boys do it. The next thing I did was I got my immediate area in order. So I cleaned the room I was sleeping in. And I wasn't really known as a neat freak at that time. I'm known as a neat freak now. But I cleaned that room spick and span. I just stayed busy. And survived. Survived one day. And then I survived another. And then I survived another. And the further and further I got away from that trauma, once you got resolution, went to calling hours and you went to the funeral, I started getting used to where I was living, my new life, which I didn't like very much. But something pretty profound happened within the first 2 weeks. I was introduced to tuna casserole. Within 2 weeks of my mom passing away, my new mother, my adopted mother, her name is Maggie, she made tuna casserole, which I had never had before. Egg noodles, cream of mushroom soup, cheese, tuna fish, chips crushed on top, peas, milk. That's the best dish I ever had in my life. 7 years old. It was the best dish I ever had in my life. 2 weeks after my mom died. I remember being blown away by it. It was just so incredible. And it was like the first smile I had on my face since my mom died. That was that good. And that was win number 1. Okay. I survived for the first couple of weeks, and then I had just a little ray of light. Just that tiny layer. Hey, there's still pleasure and joy in the world, even if I don't have my mom. And then within 2 weeks of that, I had a breakdown. Not a breakdown, but I, basically freaked out and yelled at my new mom, "You're not my mom," and started bawling my eyes out. And it was the first time I really cried. And, and I talked about this before, but she basically cuddled me and, and said, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to miss your mom. It's not okay to use the fact that your mom died to make excuses for why you didn't do what you're supposed to do. And she said the best way to honor your mother is to make something in your life. I'm a 7-year-old kid. Actually, I'm almost 8 years old at this point. Cause my birthday was coming up right after my mom died. And that was win number 2. It was also catharsis. And a month later, I went back to school. And I started making friends. My kids taught me, treated me differently because they all knew my mom had been murdered. But I started making friends. I started getting exercise, going to gym, and I got introduced to basketball pretty quickly, and that became like a thing. It's amazing how many things happened to me in the first 6 months of my life after my mom got killed that helped me, that have stuck with me as joys in my life to this day. I got introduced to basketball. I met the girl who all through high school was my school crush. And I'll tell this story later on in a later video. But anybody who knows me, anyone who grew up with me, they already know who I'm talking about. But I met her on day 1 when I went back to school, Mrs. Hophand's class, 2nd grade. I walked in and she was sitting on like the reading carpet, and I looked at her and I fell in love at that moment. And this is why when I watch the Red Pill guys, they they talk about how like love at first sight and all that stuff isn't real. That's all horseshit. That's part of what Rich Cooper says that I don't believe, because I've experienced love at first sight. I've experienced true love far later in my life with my wife. True companionship. Being with someone who really makes you a better version of yourself. I've experienced that in my life. So the third win was when I looked at this girl, and my heart jumped. Win number 4 was my Uncle Jack. Just another about, now that we had 7 people living in this trailer that I was living in, we moved. We moved to a trailer park that had a bigger trailer. And in that trailer park was one of my adopted uncles, this guy named Jack. And he was a big athlete in high school. And he took me under his wing. He lived like 2 trailers over. And my Uncle Jack was the next big win. This is all within 4 months of my mom dying. And I'd never played football before my entire life. And my Uncle Jack introduced me to football. I learned receiver routes, at the age of 8. I turned 8 by this time. And I spent that summer learning how to play football. I learned I had really good hands, and I was very, very fast. I learned that from my Uncle Jack. My Uncle Jack is also the one who started taking us to church. So my Uncle Jack and Aunt Leslie started taking us to church, and I got introduced to God for the first time, and the concept that, there's something bigger than us out there, and we don't know what it is, and lots of people disagree on what it is, but all of us have a sense that it's there. And that was like win number 5, getting introduced to God. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the summer, I'm no longer crying at night, and I'm looking forward to things the next day. And it started with, surviving the first couple of weeks and waiting for that first win. And my first win was tuna casserole. And to this day, and there are people watching this video right now who are laughing who didn't know this story. Didn't know that that's why tuna casserole is my favorite dish to this day. For 23 years of marriage with my wife, one of the first things I said to my wife when we were dating is, I need you to learn how to make tuna casserole the way my adopted mother did, or better. And every year on my birthday, it's tuna casserole. And my sons have all grown up with an affection and an affinity for tuna casserole. We all eat it with a smile on our face. A little meal 2 weeks after my mom got killed and I lost her turned into a lifetime of memories. So, yeah, I'd survive. If I lost everything personally, I'd start by surviving. I'd look for that first win, and I'd stack a couple of more. I'd consciously think about smiling. I'd consciously thinking about smiling every day. Because here's what happens. A year after my mom died, I had perspective. By the time I was almost turning 9, I had perspective. There were enough good things that happened in the year between my mom dying and me getting this perspective that I was able to achieve it. And I don't mean it in the cliche way that anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. What I mean is this. Part of what devastated me of my mom passing away is that everything good that had ever happened to me up until she died was tied directly to her. I can still smell her perfume, her Winston cigarettes, and her perfume. I could still remember her voice, and I can remember her presence. Everything I had ever known that was good and pure in the world was tied up in that woman. And so when she died, I wasn't just losing my mother, I was losing everything good that had ever happened to me. And part of the process over the next year was me realizing there's good outside of my mother too. And I may miss her, and I may want to talk to her, and it may hurt for me to hear the word mommy when someone else says mommy, because that's what I called her. But there was also good. People who wanted to help me. You know, my brother's dad took me in, and only to keep the two of us together. I mean, that's a incredibly selfless thing to do. You know, the reality is this. There really is nothing that can happen to us that we can't come back from. Nothing. With the right mindset, with the right approach, put one foot in front of the other. Focus on the little things. Start collecting wins. And before you know it, you know, you're 12 years old. You're 5 years out from your mom's death. And you're able to say to yourself, if my stepdad asks me for forgiveness, I think I'll be able to give it to him. In fact, I will. And then you set yourself free to go build an amazing life. You know, raise amazing kids. You know, run companies that make a difference in the world. Lead amazing teams. You know, partner with amazing human beings. So yeah, losing everything personally would be hard. Be very, very hard. But I'd survive. I'd find a tuna casserole. You know, I'd find a football. I'd find a basketball. I'd lock eyes with a girl who would be my true love all through school. 10 years. One of my best friends in life. There's good in the world in the wake of tragedy. And that's how you overcome that. Losing the material stuff? Nah. Once you make $1 million, it's like riding a bike. Do it all over again. All right. So if you want to know what you can do, if you're facing tragedy or it's in the wake of tragedy, or you just feel like you've lost everything, or you just want to go through this exercise, you know, what you can do today is ask yourself, what would you do? What would you do if tomorrow you lost everything, or by the end of the year you lost everything? What would be your plan of action? You know, how would you cope, and how would you recover? Would you choose to be a victim, or would you figure out how to be a victor? Please, in the comments below, just tell me what you would do. I really want to read these comments. I really do. Tell me what you would do. And do me a favor, like and subscribe. If you know of somebody who's struggling, who would benefit from this video, please share it with them. We want to get our message out to as many people as we possibly can. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.